Trump's incoming pick for FCC head Brendan Carr. Carr has taken aim at some broadcasters, including CBS News, echoing Trump's claims they engage in political bias. After Trump announced Carr's pick, Carr said on X he will ensure the FCC will enforce laws to call on broadcasters to operate in the public interest. So all he's really concerned about is be nice to Trump. Probably how he got the gig.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Ohio, Tumwa, Iowa. Please support the only independent outlet on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up.
What's up, everybody? Ron Placone here reporting for Status Coup. So we're going to talk a little bit about Trump's incoming pick for FCC head Brendan Carr. This is actually a very telling pick and pretty significant in a very disturbing way. We're going to break it down. So we're going to start here. How Trump's FCC pick could make life more difficult for media companies. Hold that thought. We're going to actually talk about how he's going to make them good first. Then we're going to get into how he might make them not so good. And it's not what you're hoping for, trust me. But here's where we're going to start. This is from the LA Times, by the way. President-elect Trump's nomination of Brendan Carr as the next chairman of the FCC is bringing both hope and fear to the media industry. For media executives, the hope comes in the promise of industry consolidation. Companies such as Fox Television Studios, Nexstar Media Group, Tegna, and Gray Media are eager to buy more television stations to better compete against deep-pocketed tech firms that are aggressively pursuing viewers and ad dollars. Carr is expected to support revisiting the rule on ownership of TV stations. All right. So let's break this thing down. The reason the current ownership model is the way that it is because of a piece of legislation called the Telecommunications Act of 1996. What the Telecommunications Act of 1996 did was it lifted all of the regulations on how much media one entity could own. So prior to that act, there were regulations, and one entity could only own 2 radio stations, 2 television stations in a given market. Telecommunications Act in 1996 lift all those regulations, and it just let entities own as much as they want. Thanks, Bill Clinton. As a result of that act, Rupert Murdoch spread his empire extensively across the country. A company called Clear Channel, which I believe is now owned by Bain Capital, Mitt Romney's company, gobbled up all the radio stations, homogenized everything, and it really began the death rattle for radio as we know it. Now, of course, technological changes played a big role in all that, and we had the rise of the internet, but there's no way our media landscape would be the way it is today if it wasn't for the Telecommunications Act of 1996, even though that was in regards to television and radio stations, we still would not have the media structure we have today. Why is that? Because if we didn't have the Telecommunications Act in 1996, there still would have been healthy and thriving local radio and local television happening across the country. There would have been more localization of the media, and there would be jobs to support it, et cetera, et cetera. So when the internet was becoming more and more a part of our lives, those already healthy entities would have evolved with it. So, while we still would have, less media in the traditional sense that we do because of the rise of the internet, you would have these outlets that were already healthy and sustainable that would have evolved with technology. So we'd have a much different media structure than we do right now. So the Telecommunications Act was a freaking disaster. It was a disastrous piece of legislation that completely gutted news and information in this country in a way that we are still recovering from. If it wasn't for the Telecommunications Act of 1996, there's a good chance outlets like Status Coup wouldn't be such an outlier. There'd be more Status Coups throughout the country. So that's what's happened. That's what that history is. That's what that legislation is. Brendan Carr wants to take it even further. He wants to homogenize things even further. It's bad enough that they completely homogenize radio. We got nothing but right-wing talk all across the country. And to throw everyone else some crumbs, they did this thing called low-power FM, where basically community radio stations could get a signal that was barely more powerful than a ham radio. And that was what we had to, quote, compete with right-wing radio. And what little progressive talk there was on the dial, they were all competing for the same ears. That's what was happening. That's why I actually think, and this is a theory, I can't prove this, but I actually think that's why we have the dunking culture that we have today. You know how in the YouTube space, it's just, pontificator number one dunks on pontificator number two, and oh, they have the wrong ideas, here's the right ideas. I think that the reason for that entire culture can be traced back to radio, and specifically the Telecommunications Act of 1996, where it forced a bunch of personalities to just compete for the same handful of listeners. So they had to dunk on each other so they could keep their job. I think that has bled, even though you don't have to do it now because you have the internet. You have a medium right there for you. But I feel like that's where that culture started and carries on to this day. So Brendan Carr wants to make that even worse. He wants to homogenize the media even further because he kind of wants a right-wing media sphere. And we're going to kind of get into that a little more here. Let's go to this piece now. This is a piece from CBS. Here we go. Trump's FCC pick, Brendan Carr, wrote Project 2025's chapter on the agency. Here's what he wants. So that's another thing to note. Brendan Carr, part of Project 2025. So when Trump says he doesn't know anything about Project 2025 or he has nothing to do with it, that's a load of bullshit. He's already appointing people that are part of Project 2025. And we don't have time to do a deep dive into Project 2025 right now, but nuts and bolts, what is it? It's basically a continuation of the New American Century, which can be traced back to the Bush administration. What are they trying to do? They're trying to control the media. They're trying to control the war machine, have endless war, and they want the United States to be a Christian nationalist fascist theocracy. That's what we're already there. I mean, we're already in many ways just a fascist theocracy, but it's about varying levels of severity. They want to take it up to 11. That's what the Bush administration wanted to do. That's what Project 2025 is trying to do. And it's basically all the same thing. Brendan Carr is just a continuation of the Bush administration and what they did with the media, which what did they do? Well, they took advantage of the homogenized media that happened because of the Telecommunications Act in 1996, and they were faxing talking points to television and radio stations all over the freaking country. Remember when that happened? Fun times. All right, so here's what he wants. Brendan Carr will oversee the agency that regulates U.S. internet access and communication networks such as TV and radio. Carr believes it's an institution ripe for change, according to the chapter he wrote in Project 2025. All right, so he's been one of the 5 commissioners since 2017. Let's see. So here's what he says. The FCC needs to change course and bring new urgency to achieving 4 main goals, including reining in big tech. I actually think reining in big tech is a good thing, but what he means by that is not actually reining in big tech. We're going to talk about it. In Project 2025, Carr highlighted what he believes to be a new approach with dealing with tech giants like Google, Meta, and others. Today, a handful of corporations can shape everything from the information we consume to the places we shop. These corporation behemoths are not merely exercising market power, they are abusing dominant positions. Okay, that's true. Here's a solution, though. The FCC should restrict immunity from Section 230, part of a law that says tech companies aren't liable if a user posts something libelous, as well as tamp down on the business's ability to censor protected speech. Okay, so that's a terrible idea. So I've talked about Section 230 a lot. What Section 230 does is it does do what they say it does. It shields companies from things that a user posts. It says like they're not liable for something a user posts, and it's been a piece of legislation for a long time. Blowing a hole in it would be a disaster, because if you blow a hole in it, it will lead to way more censorship, not less, because these social media platforms aren't going to want to risk a lawsuit. Another thing blowing a hole in it would do is it would cement places like Google and Facebook as the big juggernauts forever, because no smaller networks would be able to compete, because they'd be like, well, if a user posts something ridiculous, we're just going to be sued to oblivion, and then we're not going to be able to exist in a couple years. So blowing a hole in Section 230 is a terrible idea that would have tons of unintended consequences. And by the way, there's evidence of this, because when did they really start cracking down on social media censorship? When Amy Klobuchar first introduced the idea of gutting Section 230. When she introduced that idea, which was during the Biden administration, all of a sudden, you saw a big crackdown on social media censorship. So these people who think that getting rid of Section 230 is a good idea, it'll lead to less censorship. No, it'll lead to more. It'll lead to more, and it'll cement the tech giants as tech giants forever. So Brendan Carr's idea to actually crack down on big tech does the opposite. Because at the end of the day, what is he really angry about? He's really angry about people who aren't nice to Trump. That's what he wants. He just wants people to be nicer to Trump. I mean, he said that. All right. So let's continue with this. What are Carr's views on Elon Musk? Carr has built an alliance with billionaire Musk, the world's wealthiest person who backed Trump's campaign. In a Tuesday interview with Fox News, Carr pointed out that Musk is an example of how the federal government doesn't treat people fairly. Yeah, poor Musk. You know, he's one of the richest guy in the world, handed money by the government to do stuff he doesn't actually do. Awesome. What about his views on TikTok and Chinese businesses? Carr singled out TikTok and other Chinese-owned businesses as potential threats to U.S. security. All of the TikTok data of American citizens is in the United States. Period. It's all in the United States. None of it is in China. There's 2 data centers. I know that one of them's domestic. None of them are in China. But here's what he has to say. As law enforcement officials have made clear, TikTok poses a serious and unacceptable risk to Americans' national security. And this would align his views with the Biden administration, who also decided to be xenophobic against TikTok because they didn't like the fact that a bunch of young people were organizing on it. Let's be honest. That's what's going on. All right. So here's what he's really angry about. This next paragraph here is what Carr's really angry about. He's not concerned about big tech. He's not concerned about your data privacy. He's not concerned about a diverse media with diverse ownership. He's not concerned about any of those things because all of his ideas would make all of those issues worse. All of his ideas would lead to more media homogenization, more censorship, less diversity in the marketplace, less freedom of speech. All of his ideas would do the opposite of what he's trying to claim that they'll do. Because really, at the end of the day, Project 2025 is a theocratic fascist project. That's what it is. What does Carr say about broadcasters? Carr has taken aim at some broadcasters, including CBS News, echoing Trump's claims they engage in political bias. For instance, Carr singled out NBC, for including Trump's Democratic rival, Kamala Harris, in a Saturday Night Live skit before the election. This is a clear and blatant effort to evade the FCC's equal time rule. The purpose of the rule is to avoid exactly this type of bias and partisan conduct. After Trump announced Carr's pick, Carr said on X he will ensure the FCC will enforce laws to call on broadcasters to operate in the public interest. So all he's really concerned about is be nice to Trump. Probably how he got the gig. Trump lights his sycophants. He's got one in Brendan Carr. So that's really what this is all about. This isn't about media diversity or anything like that. This is about, are you being nice to Trump? You got to be nice to Trump or I ain't interested in you. Here's something else terrible about the guy. So he wants to stop a lot of the deployment of broadband. That's another thing about him. Hold on. Let me go ahead and pull this up for y'all. Carr says important discussion needed about BEAD's future. President-elect Donald Trump's nominee to become the chair of the FCC has given more information about how he intends to use the chairmanship. He also said that an important discussion would need to be held about the future of broadband equity, access, and deployment program. In his post, Carr wrote that Vice President Kamala Harris led the $42 billion program for expanding internet infrastructure into a thicket of red tape and saddled it with progressive policy goals that have nothing to do with quickly connecting Americans. Carr also called out the program still has not connected even a single person after over 1,000 days. So technically, he's right about that. BEAD has not been unrolled yet. BEAD is a program to connect Americans to the internet. Now, here's the issue. BEAD is an extension of the Affordable Connectivity Program. The Affordable Connectivity Program, or ACP for short, connected over 23 million Americans to the internet. It was a very successful program. It gave broadband to people who needed it. Was it perfect? Hell no. The long-term solution is municipal broadband all across the country. You guys know me. That's one of my flagship issues. But in the short term, was the ACP essential? Yes. But what happened? they discontinued it. They discontinued it in May of 24, or it might have been April, but somewhere spring of 24. And 23 million people lost access to their affordable internet. So now they're trying to rekindle it with BEAD, and Brendan Carr is doing what he can to stop that. So this is a guy who, A, is part of Project 2025. So the whole, Trump has nothing to do with 2025, Project 2025, that's BS. He wants to homogenize media even further than it already is. He wants to gut Section 230, which will have disastrous consequences. It will not lead to more free speech. It will do the opposite. It will not lead to better options of social media platforms or a more level playing field or more outlets. It will lead to the opposite of all that. So he's actually giving a gift to big tech by gutting Section 230. He's giving them a huge gift because no one will ever be able to compete with Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or whatever else ever. That's what's really happening. And by the way, one quick side note of Section 230. Sometimes people try to make it like it's a partisan thing, and they say, someone said this to me once, they said, well, the only reason you're against gutting Section 230 is because Trump wants to do it. Biden supported it too. And by the way, the bill to initially do it was introduced by Amy Klobuchar. So this has bipartisan support amidst Republicans and Democrats. And I said that to the person. I was like, Biden wants to do it too, right? And they had no response because that was the only card up their sleeve. Trying to make it out like, oh, well, if you're opposed to this terrible policy because you actually read about it and you've been paying attention to digital rights issues for 20 years, it must just be because you don't like Trump. It must be Trump derangement syndrome because I don't really understand the policy and I don't want to bother learning. So it must be Trump derangement syndrome. No. Biden supports it too. Biden also wanted to gut Section 230. It's a terrible idea. It is a gift to big tech, and it's what Brendan Carr supports. Now, something I want to say in closing. Friendly reminder, Joe Biden promised us a pro-net neutrality FCC. And I don't think that was a promise he was too enthusiastic about keeping because he started his campaign at a dinner with a bunch of Comcast executives. They're not fans of net neutrality. But we finally got it. And it took 3 years. 3 years, almost his entire term. It took 3 years for Joe Biden to seat an FCC chair. There was the right-wing smear job against Gigi Sohn, and Joe Biden did nothing about it. Now, again, that's not all on him. That's in the Senate. But he could have used his bully pulpit as the frickin' president of the United States to light a fire and say, approve this now. He didn't. He didn't do shit. He didn't defend her at all. No one did. Pretty much all the Democrats hung her out to dry, and she was just given this huge right-wing smear job by Ted Cruz, and no one did anything to help her. And it was bullshit. She would have been the most qualified FCC commissioner we could have asked for. So she had to step down, and finally, Joe Biden appointed a pro-net neutrality FCC that really, the FCC had a pretty underwhelming year because they only had freaking 1 year to do anything. Now, here you have Donald Trump bringing in a guy who wants to upend everything. His appointment coming forth before he even takes office. It took Joe Biden 3 years. I mean, it just goes to show the Democrats have no interest in governing in a way that might tick off their donors. And the Republicans, when they get power, man, they go full throttle. What a racket. What a racket. And guys, I do got to mention December 15th, all of the Los Angeles Status Coup viewers, what are you doing December 15th? Come to my show. I am premiering part 1 of a new play I'm producing. I'm producing a play called Termination Fee. It is a scathing commentary on the American healthcare system. I'm so excited to take it to some festivals next year. We're going to be making a movie out of it as well. So if you can't catch it live on stage, you will be able to catch the movie version of it. We're doing both. But you can catch part 1 of that December 15th in Los Angeles. There's going to be a stand-up comedy show to open the night. Then we're going to do part 1 of the play. You can get tickets now at my website, ronplacone.com. That's December 15th, 7 p.m., Los Angeles, Flappers Comedy Club. Grandma was going to be on that show. Sarah K. Godot is going to be on that show. Andrew Saxon is going to be on that show. I'm going to be on that show. And you can get tickets at ronplacone.com. Hope to see you there. And this is Ron Placone for Status Coup, signing out.